Alright, so we want to move on. Now, what is the next part that we want to work on? So we want to make sure that when we hit this menu here, and then we hit sign up, and we see our register modal here, any detail that we send through this, right? Maybe we are trying to create like an account, right? And then we hit continue. It will basically create the account for us, and then we will see it in our mongodb database, right? Okay. All right. So yeah, this is just tested data, so I'm just going to clean this out basically, and then okay, that's cool. Now now we want to do this, right? But since we're using React, right, we need to be able to set up our express node.js server with our typescript. Okay, so how do we do that? What we can do is we can quickly go into Google. What I did was basically I went into Google and I searched for express node.js typescript, and then I saw this article, this one, the one made by Evelyn Taylor, and then I just tapped on the link, and then it basically took me to the article. Right. So, I mean, since I've already opened the article, I don't think it's necessary to go inside. Okay, but it's here now. So now that it's here, okay, so it says we should basically create our folder, right? Very sorry. They said we should create our folder. And so looking at where we are, our Airbnb tutorial here, we need to create a new directory, that is server, right? So say mkdir server, right? And then we cd into the server, and then inside the server we say our npm init y, right? And then after npm init y comes, we install express. Yeah, that's actually the next step. We install express here, then after express we just install the types as dependencies, and then we move on to create the ts config, right? Okay, so if I open this up, you should see it's here, right? Okay, so yeah, basically express is being installed. Okay, it is done installing. It's done installing. So let me quickly paste this into the terminal and hit enter. Wait for it to install. But while it's installing, let's create our ts config. So I'll just create this file, say ts config.json. Then I'll just copy all these, and then I'll paste it here. Then over here we have to create an src or a source folder, right? src. So in here we'll create the src, right? Then inside the src we should have our index.ts, right? So inside the src have your index.ts. Then inside the index.ts we can just copy and paste, right? Okay, so basically after copying and pasting we can set up our scripts, right? But for the scripts we are not going to be using ts node. We are going to use node mon so that we can keep tracking our changes, right? So in order for us to do that, we're going to npm I node mon, we're going to npm install node mon basically, and then once that is while that is being set up, you're just going to come here, set up the start script, and then say node mon. So we can basically just copy this and paste it here, and then change this to node mon, right? So that we can track our changes. Okay, so once that has been set up, all we have to do is say npm start, and then we should see that our server is running on a certain port. Now for the port, we can actually create our env file and store the port in there. So let's start by creating an env file, and then we store the port in there. So ports, and then we say 3000, but if there's no port 3000, then we can give it 3001, right? So process, so we say process, let me give my space and say process dot env dot ports, right? Or 3001, right? Okay, but we wouldn't still be able to access 3001. We won't be able to access port 3001 because we have not installed .env for us to use, right? So what we can do is I can close the terminal and install .env. Make sure it's in smaller case letters. Make sure it's in smaller case letters. So .env. All right. Okay, so .env has been installed. What we'll do is we'll just import .env from .env, and then what we'll do is we'll just say .env.config, right? And then when we save and then we restart the server, we should see that it will access the port from 3000. Okay, so you can see that the port is running on localhost port 3000. Okay, this is awesome. It's good that we know when we test our server on our port. So say localhost 3000. Let's change this one to 3000. You can see it's here, 3000. You can see, awesome. All right, now that we have this all worked out, you can go back here and then start setting up certain things, right? Let's start working things out. Okay, so first of all, we need to install a few packages. One way we can install, I think I can close this terminal, and then I'll just go back and then cd into the server, and then we do all the installations here. So I can say npm install course, right? So I can install course, I can install body parser. Okay, I can install course, I can install body parser, right? And then I think that's it for now. And like, let's add helmets. So basically what course is supposed to help us do is that course is supposed to help us communicate with our front end, or with a cross origin link, or any type of link that isn't associated with our server. So we are the ones, we are going to be the ones to set up the link it can accept, right? Or a place where it can accept requests from. So that's what course is going to enable us to do. Body parser is going to enable us to pass data to our server, so we can turn it into the database. And then helmets is going to help protect our vulnerable HTTP headers from any vulnerabilities, the attacks or whatever. Okay, so now that we know what these things are going to be used for, I'm quickly going to install that. So yes, we are going to install that and wait for them to finish installing. Then we install the types of course. I think we need to install the types of course. Okay, so it's done installing. We are going to install at types course, right? And then we should install the course types. Okay, now that we have these ones installed, what do? We now import them and use them in our projects, right? So we can see import course from what? Course. Okay, then we can come here, say middleware, or we can even do it on top here. So we can say middleware, then we'll say what? app.use course, and then course is going to take an origin, and then this origin is going to come from our local hosts in our local server. So for the local host, what? 5174. At the moment it's 5174, but I think usually it has to be 5173, right? So let me do it 5173, because when I restart the server it will be at 5173. So let me quickly make that 5173, and then I would just do this. We can even test it right now. We can test it right now actually. So how are we going to test it? I just have to go back and then go into cd into our Airbnb one more time, and then say npm run dev here, and then over here we can pass in credentials. Okay, yeah, I now get why we are getting the error. It has to be an object to pass in. Okay, good. Then we pass in what? Credentials. Yeah, true. Right, everything has been set up nicely. The next thing we want to do is to add a body parser. So app.use what? App.use. Then inside we pass the body parser, right? So you can see that the body parser is not showing up. Now what do? In a situation like this, we import it. Okay, so let's import body parser from body parser. No, we can't import it like this. Okay, we can't import it like this. Alright, this is awesome. This is great. Now that we have this going on, right? Now that we have this going on, what we want to do is we want to now set up a few folders so that we can work a few things out, right? We are not going to make our backend server as complicated as we did the other time. Just going to keep things very simple and fast. So first of all, what do we need? We need a bunch of folders, right? Let's quickly create these folders with our terminal so that things will be very fast. I'll just cd backwards, cd back into server, and then we'll create the folder. So we'll say make dir routes, then we create our models. Okay, we don't even need to create models for now. We just create the routes, controllers, and core, and we create cores. Core actually, a core folder. Okay, then these folders will be created for us. Then inside the core, we can create a new file called index, or we can say routes.ts, right? Routes.ts. Then inside this routes.ts, we will do a few things. Okay, we'll do a few things, but over here the first routes that we want to create is going to be our auth.routes.ts, right? That's going to be the first thing, and then the controllers is going to be our what? Our auth.controllers.ts, right? Okay, this is awesome. All right, now that we have this all set up like how we expect it to be set up, what can we do next? All right, so yeah, so basically we want to now set up our Prisma so that we can work things out and then help them work out, right? But before we do that, let us set up our routes so that we can use all our routes automatically. Now we want to make sure that we are creating a function called useRoutes, right? We are going to create a function called useRoutes, and then here we're going to say app. Now for this app, I think I can't remember back in the past I used to pass in something like express application or something. I remember passing something very similar to that. I think application from express. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, the last time I was trying to build this project, I wasn't seeing it. That's why I just got a little confused. But I guess it's here. It should work, right? So here we create if it doesn't work, we just come back and then fix it, right? That's why we keep learning. So create const and say base URL, right? So you can say base URL, and then we set that base URL to be what? API. We say API v1, right? Now that we have the base URL here, we want to say that what app, this app that's above dot use, right? And it's going to use what? Then we bring our backticks, then we take the base URL here, base URL, oh come on, right? And then we just bring our slash, right? We just bring in our slash, and then so okay, just so we don't get confused, let's bring the first slash, right? So okay, let's just leave it like this. Then after passing the base URL, then we can pass auth, so that it can represent the first it can basically represent the first route that we are going to be creating. So auth, and then after we come here, bring in the comma, and then bring in, so we can say something like auth routes, of which we are going to import very soon. So inside the route here, we have our auth routes.ts. What we can do is we can import express and then create the router out of it, right? So let us import express. Let's import express from express. Okay, I wonder why the snippets are not showing anymore, but okay, we just work through them. We import express from express, then we make sure that we export default. Oh come on, I forgot. So yeah, we say const router, and then we are going to say express router. Then we just close this. Then we export default the router, exports default router. Alright, now that we are exporting default the router, we can come here and then import. So we can import what are we importing? Our auth routes, right? So we just have to name it auth routes, and then we take it from, we basically have to go a step backwards, go into the routes, and then take it from the auth dot routes. Awesome, this is awesome. Then we'll come into our index. Okay, yeah, I made one mistake. Actually, these folders are supposed to be inside the SRC, right? They're supposed to be in the SRC, so we quickly move them as soon as possible. But at least let's just at least use. So yeah, I'm just going to pause the video, and so that this thing can quit. Then when it quits, we just move all these controllers core routes into the SRC, and then yeah, we just implement it. We actually left it one more thing to do here, so let me just pause it and come back. What we want to do is, you see over here, we want to come down and say something like routes, and then come and say what use routes. We're going to have to import it. Okay, so it looks like we didn't export it basically, so we just say export defaults use routes, yeah, and then we will go into our index.ts. We should be able to import it. I need the snippet to show. I need it to show. Okay, it's not showing. Let me start. So use routes. Okay, it's not showing. I want it to show so that it will be very easy for me to just. Okay, it's not showing, so I guess I need to import it. Okay, let's just move the things. Let's just move the things, right? The things that I said we would move. So let's move the routes, move the core, move the controllers, and let's try again to see if we can import the use routes function. Okay, yeah, we just imported it, and then we pass the app inside, because when we pass the app, it will come and pass through this application here, and we should see it work, right? Let me try logging out something to see if it works. So I would say something like over here we want to say something like router dot post, then inside we want to pass in the home or normal no routes, extra routes, links. Then we just say something like an async arrow function basically. Then we just log out. Okay, then we just say working. So over here, so quickly over here, when we go into let me quickly, so I'll say localhost, so I'll say localhost 3000 API v1 slash auth, and I enter. Yeah, let's make it a get actually. Let's make it a get, and then yes, run it one more time. Yeah, you can see that it's showing working, so that means it works like how we expect it to. That is awesome. So that means we can move on. All right, we can move on. So now that we have this one all set up, it means we want to now start setting up our Prisma and all these other things, right? Okay. Alright, so in order for us to be able to set up our Prisma, what do we want to do? What I did was I said express node.js Prisma, and then I just put it in, and then the first link that came, I think I didn't go, it wasn't here, it was actually BroWorks, yes, how to use Prisma with Express. Then I just follow the steps that were used here, but just some small tweaks. So when we come here actually, you'd see that it will tell us to say npm install Prisma client. Already we have Express, so no need to install it again. So we can just copy this one and then come here. So okay, so we're already in the server, right? So let's cd into the source, right? Or okay, we can just cd backwards, and then so we can just say npm I Prisma client, right? And then it will just install our Prisma client. Then basically once it's done installing our Prisma client, it says we should do what, we should create a directory named Prisma, right? So what we can do is can cd into our src and then create a directory called Prisma, right? And then we can cd into Prisma and then touch or create a new file called what, schema.prisma, right? Now that we have the new file called schema.prisma, if you open schema.prisma, it said what was encountered with an error. Okay, no problem, let's just create the file, right? Now that you have your file created, some of you when you start writing whatever you're writing, so let's copy this one, let's copy this and paste it here. If you are new to using Prisma and you just copy this one here, you realize that you won't get a colored view of what is going on here. Like you wouldn't get a nicely colored view of what is going on, right? So what you want to really do is, you want to go into your extensions and then you search for Prisma in your extensions. So you can see I've already downloaded it here, so you don't need to download it again. Then now you should be able to have a much more arranged way of or a much more colored way of working with your Prisma file, right? So now since you are using MongoDB, we are just going to change the name here to MongoDB. That is awesome. Now for our database URL, we're just going to copy this and then send it into our .env, and then we create this variable and then pass in our database URL. If you are new to MongoDB, all you have to do is to go into mongodb.com. All you have to do is to go into mongodb.com, and then you create a new account. You create a new account in mongodb, and then you can take your connection string, but you don't just get your connection string. When you create your new account in mongodb, then you would create a new cluster, and after the cluster is created, you click on connect, and then you get your connection string and you paste it. So I already have an account, so I'm just going to sign in with Google. I'm just going to log in with Google. It's going to open up the page, and then I'll just walk you through a few things. Okay, so mongodb is opening up. I guess we have to wait a bit. Okay, so mongodb is here. You can see that it's here. What we can do right now is we can create a cluster, right? So when you click on create a cluster, or when you create the account when you create the account newly and you see a button that says create a cluster, click on it, and then you can come and name your cluster. Select any of these ones that you want to select. Then okay, let's go down. Then you just select the region where you want the cluster to be, depending on where you are. Select the one that is closest to you for a higher speed and performance, and then you can click on create deployment, right? Okay, you can click on create deployment, but I mean right now, make sure you select the free one. Right now I already have a cluster, so I can't select a free one or a shared cluster, right? That is why they are offering me all of these, but make sure you choose a free one as well. Then once your cluster is created, what you want to do is you want to first of all do something called database access and network access, right? So over here, if you go into the network access, you can add a new IP address, and then usually they'll give you the first IP address here, right? This one, the 154.1.160. But it could be a little bit of a problem. So what you want to do is you want to put the 0.0.0. Then what that does is it allows you to access your database from anywhere at all you are. I already have that, so there's no need to recreate it. Then you go into the database access, and that is going to be a username and password. You can add a new user. Saying you can say something like YT, or you can say something like your name. I mean, something. It doesn't have to be so unique. It's just like some. You see, you just have to make sure that people don't get access, or no one gets access to these links, right? I mean, just make sure it's in the right hands all the time, right? Basically, after you are done with that, you can go back to the database. You can go back to the database tab here, and then click on connect. So when you click on connect here, you just click on mongodb for VS Code, and then you copy this and just paste it, right? If you already have the mongodb shell, I'm sure you already know how to get all these things. So me, inside the mongodb shell, I'll just copy the string, right, and then I'll just paste it. I'll just paste it here. So as you can see over here, this is my username and my password. If I reverse, you see, so over here I just write what soluservant, and then I write soluservant here as well. Soluservant as well, and then I can just say what AirBnB clone, right? I can just say AirBnB clone, and that is going to create a separate a separate group of collections over here for you to be able to work with on that particular application, right? Okay, so basically so basically, now that we have the database in here working and everything, what we want to do is let's go back to this article here, and then it says generate a Prisma client. So we have our schema.prisma here, but we've not generated a Prisma client yet. In order for us to be able to do that, we can quickly do this, copy this, and then paste it, right? We can paste it here, or I mean, you can paste it here. So cd into the, okay, I think SRC, pasting it in the SRC2 is okay. But right now we do not have any, we actually do not have any schema yet to generate our Prisma for, according to that particular schema, right? So in order for us to get our schema, let's just start creating it as we need. Okay, so inside our Prisma file, I want to quickly calm down. Why is this button here? Okay, run Prisma generate, okay, no problem. So here, what we are going to create, we are going to create our models, right? So we can say model, right, user. Model user is going to be our first model, and then inside this model user, it's going to have an ID, right? And then this ID here is going to be a string, obviously. Okay, so what we are going to do is this ID then is going to be a string, and then after it's being a string, since it's mongodb, there's a way we are going to have to write things, right? So we are going to put in this ID, and then we are going to add a default, right? And then we are going to say auto, okay, and then we are going to say space, and then map, and then going to map through the ID section, and then over here we say at db dot object id, name string, email string, name string, email string, and make sure that these two are optional, right? And then we want to make sure that it is unique, right? The email is also unique. And then once we have this working, we want to pass in the email verified, and then we want to say that is date time, okay, date time, and then we take the image or the user image, and then we say that is going to be a string, and then that is also going to be optional. And then we can take hashed password, and then we can say that is also going to be a string, and that is also optional. Then we can take created at, okay, created at date and time, or date time, and then we are going to set that to be default. We're going to set that to be default now, right? Default now, and then updated at, then we set that to be a date time, updated at, right? And then we can come down to the favorite IDs, okay, favorite IDs, okay, favorite IDs. Then we say it's going to be an array of strings, and then these strings are going to be what? db dot object id. Alright, so inside the accounts here, then over here we have what? Listings, and then we have reservations, and then reservation. Now these are also models we are going to be creating, and then we are going to link them back, so don't worry if you see this error. Alright, so now that we have this all set up, we want to move on to the account model. Then we just link it up together, right? So we say model account, okay, then this account is definitely going to be having an ID, but this ID, we can just take the same thing that we passed in here, we just pass it down here, right? That the autocomplete has helped us do that very quickly. So you just copy what is out here and paste that in case you don't have autocomplete. Then we are going to have a user ID. We're going to have a user ID, and this user ID is going to be a string, and then it's going to be what, a db dot what, object ID, db dot object ID, right? And then here we are going to set it to be a type what, and then this type string, and then you can say provider string 2 as well, and then okay, provider string, right? Then we can see what, provider account ID also is going to be string, right? And then we can pass in the refresh token, that is also going to be string, and then it's going to be what, db string, right? db string, right? Then we can pass in the access token, that is also going to be db string. Then we say expires at, right? So expires at is just going to be an int, right? An optional int as well. And then we are just going to pass in the token type as well, that's going to be string. And then we pass in the scope, and that scope is also going to be an optional string. And then we say the ID token, right? So we can take the ID token, and then that is going to be an optional string, and it's going to be at db string, right? Then over here we have the session state, and then that is going to be a string, but it's going to be mandatory. All right, so now that we have these working, we want to take our user and relate it with their accounts. Okay, so we say what, user, and then this user is going to be coming from our user model that is above, and then we say in relation, right? And then we open up this bracket, right? So inside this bracket we pass in the fields. So inside the fields we are going to take or put in the user ID, right? So we are going to basically take the user and put that user into the user ID field of their account, okay? But where are we getting that ID from? And that is going to be our references, and then the references is basically, we are going to be passing the ID that we created for the user into the user ID array there, or into the user ID section there inside the account part, and then we are going to set on delete to be cascade. Okay, right, now that we have this all set up, we want to count down and then say at unique, and then we are going to say what, provider, right? Provider, and what, provider account ID. Alright, this is awesome. This is great that we've been able to set this up. Okay, now that we have the account section all created, nicely done for us, we want to create a new model called listing. You can see that there is no error above when it comes to the account side. Now we want to create the model called listing, right? So inside the listing we open up the curly braces, then we pass in our ID as usual, you know, the same ID that we had above. Oh yeah, the same ID that we had above. You can see we are passing in the same thing as usual, right? Then down here we take what, we pass in the title, and we say that the title is going to be a string, right? Then we come here and say description is going to be string. Then we say that the image src, right? Image src, or image source, basically we're going to set that to be a string, right? And then we can say created at, right? Created at, that is going to be a date time, that's going to be a date time, and then we are going to set the default to be what, now, right? This is awesome. Okay, now that we have the created at, we can pass in the category, then the category is going to be a what, a string. Then what we'll do is the room count is going to be what, int, right? It's going to be an integer. And then we have the bathroom count, right? So for the bathroom count, alright, bathroom count, okay, so bathroom count, and that is also going to be an int, right? Then we have the location value. You have the location value, and then this location value is going to be a type of what, string. And then we have what, the user ID field as usual, and then for this user ID field we are going to pass in a string type, and then we are going to say that is going to be a what, a db object ID. Okay, then we pass in the price, and then the price is going to be what, int. Okay, this is awesome. So now that we have this, we can say user, then user. So instead of rewriting this whole thing, what you can do is you can come above here, copy this and paste it here, right? Then once we have it all pasted there, I think for the listing, basically that is basically it. It's basically the same thing, right? Alright, so we just say reservation. So reservation, right? Then we say what, reservation. So we are basically trying to say we are linking the reservation to be part of the list. We are linking it together, creating a relationship between them, right? Okay, so we have reservations and reservation. Then we are going to quickly create the reservation model, right? So over here we're going to create the model and name that reservation. Oh, come on. Reservation. Okay. Reservation. Oh, come on. Reservation here, and then okay, then inside this reservation here we can pass in what, the same ID that we set up above there, right? Then over here we pass in the user ID. So we say user ID, and this user ID is going to be what, a string as usual, and then it's going to be what, a db dot what, object ID. That is awesome. Okay, then we now come and then pass in the listing ID. So we see listing ID, listing ID. Then the listing ID is going to be a type string, and then we are going to say at what, db dot what, string, db dot object ID, sorry, object ID. That is awesome. Okay, then we now say start date, right? And then that is going to be what, date time, and then we are going to say end date. End date is going to be what, date time too as well, and then we say that the total price in general is going to be what, int, right? Then we can now take the created at, then set that to date and time, and then we say what, default now. Okay, this is awesome. Then what we'll do is we just go back to this user relation here that we created over here, and then we come down and then pass it in. Nicely done. And then we can now take the listing, right? Then we say, listing, then we take the relation field, the relationship, right? And then we say inside the field what, listing ID, pass in the ID of the listing that we have above here. Yes, and that should basically be it. The reason why we have an error here is because we missed an R. Yes, so this should basically work nicely. Okay, so now that we have this working out well, what we want to do now is we want to run our npx what, Prisma generate, right? So while we are running that, what we want to do is we want to come into the SRC again and create a new folder called libs, right? Then inside libs we pass in what, we want to pass in what, our Prisma DB, right? Prisma db.ts. Okay, then inside your Prisma db, what you want to do is you want to import your Prisma client, right? So Prisma client, right? So Prisma client from what? From at Prisma / client. Okay, so now that we are importing our Prisma client from Prisma at / client, what we want to do is we want to quickly, okay, yeah, it's there. So what we want to do is we want to quickly declare, right? So we want to declare global. What? Global, and then we say var, then we say what? Prisma, then we say Prisma client, and then we come down and say what? We say that if, let me use the if snippets, right? So here's this the condition. We say that if the global what? If global dot Prisma doesn't exist, or if it's false, we want to say what? Global dot Prisma should be equal to, or if it's empty, we should say global dot Prisma. It should create what? A new Prisma client for us to be able to use. Then we'll export default global dot Prisma. This is awesome. So now that we have these bad boys working as they should be working, the npx Prisma generate is still in progress. I think it takes quite a while for it to complete, but while it is still working, why don't we just work on our register routes, right? And then once we are done with that, we can just pause the video, and then once the Prisma generate is done, we can just test it, right? Okay, so now that we have this going on, I want to come to the auth route here, and then inside the controllers we have our auth controller.ts, right? So auth.controller.ts. Okay, it looks like file rename is taking quite a while, so I'll just pause the video, and then when it's done, I'll just get back to it. Okay, so it basically just renamed it, and we are back, right? So as we are here, what we want to do is we want to create the controller functionality for our endpoint, for our register endpoint, right? So what we want to do is, first of all, we are going to import a few packages, right? We are going to import a few packages. So let's first of all import bcrypt from bcrypt, right? Okay, then once we have that, we can import what? Request and response from express, right? So requests, response from express. Then we can come here and then import Prisma. So we can just import Prisma, but we'll not import it as Prisma db, we just import it as Prisma. And then when you hover over it, it should bring you the same thing, right? So import this Prisma, and then over here we come and then export a new function, controller function, right? So we can say register user controller. Then it's going to be an asynchronous function. That takes in the request. Going to take in the request, and then the response, and then after we equate it to this, and then inside we are going to have our try catch here, and then we are going to basically take the name, email and password from the body. Then right after we are done, we take the hashed password as well from our bcrypt, right? Then after we are done, we can say what user.await prisma.create. Then inside we pass in our object, which is data, and then we say that what name, then we say what email, and then we take what hashed password, right? But there's no need to pass in this password in addition to it. You just take this one like that, since it's just the same name, right? Then all we have to do is to end it, and then all we have to do is to end it, right? So we end it with this. I think we need to end it again with this. Okay, yeah, and then we have to actually work on our try catch, right? So we can quickly just JSON. You can just JSON the user. No need for the message for now. You can just JSON the user, and then for our catch block here, you can just catch this error and log it out, for instance, and then pass in error creating user or fail to register user or whatever, right? So here we can just say console.log error, okay, and no need for console error. Okay, so then we just end the block, right? Then yeah, that should be it for what you are trying to create in general. Okay, it looks like we do not have bcrypt installed, so what we are going to do is I'm going to say npm I bcrypt, right? Bcrypt, or let's check if we have bcrypt installed. No, we do not have bcrypt installed, so I guess we have to install bcrypt. So npm I bcrypt, then after we would install the bcrypt types as a dev dependency too as well. Then we can use it inside our project. Alright, so while it is being installed, what we want to do is we want to come into the auth routes here, and then we want to replace this with what's the register user. So register user. Yeah, we did export it, right? So that means we can use it. So register user controller, it's here, nicely done. Then here we can just say register, right? Okay, then we change this to posts. Okay, now we need to also install the types as well. So types bcrypt. Okay, what errors are we getting? Yeah, I could not find the bcrypt, so that's what we are trying to. Oh, I had to install it as a dependency, but I don't know, as a dev dependency. But okay, let's save and then see if we would keep getting the error. Okay, no, we didn't get the error. So it's there, right? It's there, like how we expect it to be there. Okay, right. Now that we have it all implemented on the implemented on the back end, I guess we can try to implement it on the front end now. So the back end is already running on port 3000. When we come inside our front end here, and what we want to do is we want to have a new folder called API, right? Now inside the API we want to have an index.ts here. Then inside this index.ts, here, let me cd backwards again. Okay, then cd into our AirBnB, right? Then I can install Axios, right? I think Axios is already there. Yeah, so this API file. So I think Axios, let's try importing Axios. Yeah, Axios is already here. So now that we have our Axios, what we want to do is we want to create a base URL, right? So we can say const API in capitals, and then over here we can say what Axios dot create, and then inside this we can pass in the base URL, and then we can even say with credentials, right? Credentials, set that to true. Okay, this is awesome. Then once we have this all set up, we just take this part alone, and then we pass in 3000 API v1. Okay, this is awesome. Then over here we can now create a new folder and say what auth. Then inside this auth we can say that what auth.api.ts, right? auth.api.ts. Then inside this auth.api.ts we can create our first API endpoint that we'll use, right, for the front end. So here what we say is we say const, then we say register user. Then this register user is going to import our API that we created. We have to export the API actually. So here we are going to export it. Going to export the API here, and then over here we have to just import it. Okay, so we just imported the API. Then we see what's post, right? So this API post is basically going to be taking two things, right? Yeah, it's basically going to be taking two things. So for all the authentication things that we are going to be implementing here, we are going to have to be using auth at the end of them, right? So in order for us to make it easy, let's just create a const and say base URL as well over here, and then inside here we just create like a simple auth, right, in small letters, auth. Do you remember the auth that we created over here? That's basically what we're implementing, this auth. So that's what we're implementing in the above auth.api.ts. So here then we just use our backticks, right? Then we bring in our $sign, the open brackets, we pass in the base URL. Then after we now pass the register, right? Then yeah, this has to be a function actually. This has to be a function. Then we pass in, so here we are going to say data, and then data is going to be an object, right? Data is going to be an object, and then we are just going to pass this data at the end here. Okay, yeah, so yeah, so basically that should be it in general. Then what we'll do is we just export this. So export this, right? Okay, so now that we've been able to set this up inside our front end, well, this API is not being taken from the right spot, right? So let's take it from the index.ts. Alright, so what we'll do is we just run npm run dev so that we can test the API on the front end. Let's quickly refresh. Okay, let's quickly refresh. It's still 5174, so let's change the origin here inside our course to 5174. Okay, changing it to 5174. Then yeah, okay, so yeah, right, so this is here. I'll just come to where I think that is, we need the register modal, right? So inside the register modal here, you can see that we already have these ones here. What you are going to do is you are going to remove this, and then rather bring out the register user from our API. Then we pass in the data instead, right? Now when we pass in the data, we can basically send back the response. So we can const res await here, then we can just log the response or check it out in the network section. So response dot what data, right? Then yeah, we can even pass a toast success, right? So toast success, then we see what you can see that registration was successful, or registration successful, okay, or user registered successfully sounds better. Registered successfully sounds way better. Alright, now that we have this working, if you want to understand, we are basically taking the data that we are passing, the name, email, password, and then we are passing that data through to this place, and then yeah, it goes through, and then yeah, basically it should just work out in general, right? So I just have to click on the sign up here, and then let's go into our database to make sure that there is nothing in there that is going to interfere with what we are trying to do, right? So inside the user side that I have here, if I refresh, you can see that we don't have any data here to interfere with the user in general, right? So since we don't have any data here, what we can do is I can just come here and pass in the soluservant@gmail.com, soluservant digital solutions, and just write like some dumb password, okay, then I'll just hit continue, and then you can see that the user has been created nicely, and the results just appeared here nicely for us to see. If I refresh, you should see it here. And also, I think another way you can check is through like the network section in your inspect elements. Yeah, let's see how we can check that out. I just hope it's there, basically. Network. How am I going to see it there? Is it here? I don't know what I'm gonna see. I think I thought I learned it, but I don't know. Some way somehow I kind of forgot how. Yeah, I think preview. Yeah, yes, I think like preview or something like that. Oh, how come I don't? How come I forgot how to do it? But yeah, yeah. It's here. It's here. So register, and then a preview. Yeah, and we should see nicely done over here. Nicely. Okay. So yeah, that is basically it for setting up a registering with email, password, and name. And then yeah, we'll move on to registering with our socials.